A CDC advisory panel is set to meet Friday to discuss safety concerns with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The shots were stopped after a small number of blood clotting cases were discovered in people who received the J&J dose. CBS4 Medical Editor Dr. Hnida has been following all of these developments and joins us now. So, Dr. Dave, how important is it that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine becomes available again?
I think it's really important, especially when you look at it from the standpoint of getting to herd immunity. I think that the more vaccines we have available, the more quickly we are going to reach herd immunity. And then when you look at the J&J vaccine in particular, it's a good vaccine from the essence of time. In other words, you wind up getting one vaccine and 2 weeks later, you are considered to be fully immunized and vaccinated. And this is in contrast to the other vaccines, which are two-shot vaccines and take 5 to 6 weeks in order to get the consideration of full immunity. And then I think you also look at the J&J vaccine as being very valuable from the standpoint that it's a good vaccine for rural areas, underserved areas, because the vaccine is very easy to store. It is very easy to administer. And then I also take a look at it from actually not a local standpoint, but just from a global standpoint. And you may say, well, I really am not so concerned about what's going on in another area of the world, but you really do need to consider COVID as being something that is a worldwide phenomenon. And if we are having folks come in to the United States, we do want the vaccine to be available to those people prior to travel. And if you are planning on leaving the country and going elsewhere, you certainly would like to see rates of cases down. And I think the final thing is really an issue of vaccine confidence. I think that we get this vaccine J&J back in circulation again. I think people will feel better just overall, removes some doubt about the safety of vaccines. And I think really what we're going to see at the end of the week, we'll see most likely J&J being back in circulation, and there may be some limitations, limitations based on gender, limitations based on age. And most importantly, really what's going to wind up happening here is the education of healthcare professionals. We need to be able to understand this clotting phenomena, recognize it, as well as know the correct way to treat it, because it's different than other types of clots. Once again, it is a very, very rare phenomenon. I think we can expect to see the vaccine back in the unpaused mode very quickly.
Great. And both Pfizer and Moderna says it's likely we'll need booster shots within 12 months of our second dose. Will the COVID vaccine end up being somewhat like the flu shot, and we'll always need to stick with the same vaccine?
It's interesting because we've been kind of wondering about this for quite some time, and it does look like this is going to wind up being the case. We are seeing that immunity does tend to wane a little bit over time after being fully vaccinated, so a booster dose may be required. And then you take a look at variants. Variants are a big thing when it comes to COVID, and they're a big thing when it comes to influenza. That's why we get a different influenza vaccine every year, different booster shots, so to speak. So we may wind up seeing a deal where we wind up getting, yes, an extra vaccination, or on the other hand, we may wind up having it be an annual event, just like with the flu vaccine. Now, in terms of whether or not let's say you got the Pfizer the first time around, do you need to get the Pfizer for your booster shot? Considering the fact that these are new vaccines, that may very well be the case. We just may want to play it safe and say, well, if you got Pfizer before, we'll give you the booster with Pfizer. On the other hand, there is this thing in immunity and vaccinations where we actually find that with certain diseases, you can actually get better immunity with different types of vaccines. In other words, we see different vaccines giving what we call a stacked immunity. So it would not be surprising to, down the line, know that it's okay to wind up mixing and matching vaccines, so to speak.
Oh, it's interesting. I learn something new every time I talk to you about this. So Colorado is seeing the highest number of coronavirus hospitalizations since February, unfortunately. Do you think vaccines are happening fast enough to keep that from becoming an overwhelming number?
Interesting. It seems like we're always using the race analogy when we talk about this, vaccinations versus cases and variants. And, let's face it, we are still in the race. We're going to win this race. But the problem is there are going to be a number of people who get sick as the race continues on. We can see the finish line. We're not quite there. We're doing really well when it comes to vaccinations, but you have to take a look at the numbers very, very, very hard here. About half of our population has at least received one vaccination. They have to wait for their second vaccine, so they're not fully vaccinated. Then you have folks who have not gotten a vaccine at all, and so we still are away from having everyone being fully vaccinated. And then you take a look at really the fact that hospitalizations and case rates and testing positivity rates are way up there right now. And so those are going to be factors when it comes to, once again, how we do in this race against getting the people of Colorado protected. I think that a lot of folks will say, well, it's really younger people who are being affected by this. But just stop for a second. I mean, hospitalizations are high right now, and it is younger people who are being hospitalized, and they are in the hospital. They are that sick. So it's no difference between a younger person being hospitalized versus an older, what you might say is a more at-risk person. Hospitalization is hospitalization. So there is some serious disease out there. And then even if a younger person does not wind up getting a severe case of COVID, they are more likely to become a COVID long hauler. People who continue to have symptoms for months and months and months after having even a mild illness. So this is a big concern. And so I don't think we can say that, well, we are declaring that today we are pandemic free. We are done. We're not. We're going to get there. And I actually believe that, 4 to 6 weeks from now, we're going to be in a good place. But I think we're speeding things up a little bit too rapidly for what's going on in terms of doing a good job getting people vaccinated, which we are doing, but we're just not quite there yet.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Day, for your insight as always.